Hello and welcome to the Ellen Made Book Club. Today I want to talk about the books that I read or didn't read in August and what I'm currently reading and my plans for September. I did not have the best reading month in August. I think it's probably the worst one I've had this year. I haven't read a lot of books, and so I was almost like, should I even do a wrap-up video? Like, I'm gonna do the book club videos about the book club books, and so I don't really have all that much to talk about. But then I thought I don't have to read a certain number of books to make a wrap-up video. I'll just wrap up the month as it was. So let's start with the first book that I finished in August, and that was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. And this was one of the book club picks this month, so I'm gonna be talking about this a lot more in a separate video. But for now, I'll just say that overall, I really enjoyed it. I have read Circe by the same author before, and also her short story Galatea, and really loved both of those. I really enjoyed this one as well, but it did feel a little bit different, and I feel like she has evolved as an author since writing this. But I also think that it's just the perspective of female characters, and I think I relate to that more. But that being said, I really enjoyed the relationship in this story between Achilles and Patroclus. I thought that was really beautifully written and told. They both came alive as characters to me, and I really enjoyed reading about their relationship and how their discussions and thought patterns went. I really liked Patroclus as a character. He seems like a very genuine and kind person with a lot of integrity. I liked that they weren't always in agreement on everything, but could still have a mature discussion about things, even though they're not very old in this story, which is a little bit creeps me out a little bit when they get together, not because they're two men, but just because they're young. Feels like I shouldn't be there. But anyways, I thought it was a beautiful story. I love the Greek mythological setting. I don't have a lot of notes at all about this book, which is both good and bad, I think. The only thing that I did write was that I liked the writing and the pacing and the atmosphere. I really liked it, but it was nothing that stood out to me. There was nothing that annoyed me about it, but there was also nothing that stood out to me in a very extremely positive way, other than I think it's a really good book, and I really enjoyed the relationship and the story, and that's kind of what I expect from a book. It met my expectations, but it's not a 5-star read for me. I would say it's a 4-star. I really liked it. I didn't love it, but I also don't have anything bad to say about it. It was very enjoyable. I'm glad I finally got to read it, and I would recommend it to anyone who is interested in reading mythological retellings. I think it was lovely. Yeah. And again, I will talk about this more in the separate book club video where I will answer all of your questions. The second book I started was The Witching Tide by Margaret Meyer. This was a rushed pick at the library. I just went on the fact that it said something about witches in the title and it had gold on the cover. So I thought I would give it a shot, and I did, and it was not my favorite. I didn't finish it. I think I got about 12% into it. I both read the physical book and listened to the audiobook. I don't think it was the right time for me to read any book about witches. And this was not a cozy, witchy vibe with potions and cottage core kind of witchiness. This was more the historical burning women alive kind of witch story, especially since having read a lot of other heavy books this summer. I didn't feel good. And also the writing was not my favorite. I thought it felt a bit amateurish, and it just wasn't very good, and so I didn't read it. During the middle of the month, I didn't read a lot at all. I did start a little bit here and there and picked up a few different books and just tried to get going in one of them, but it didn't really take. I had a lot of other things on my mind, and we also tried to do some other things. So the next book I finished right at the end of the month, and that was Parable of the Talents by Octavia E. Butler. This is the second part in the Earthseed duology. And this was a buddy read with Kat at Curious Cat and Chelsea at Libraries and Lattes. You can see me try to finish this in a week in the vlog that I posted recently if you want to watch that. And I do have a lot of thoughts about this book, and I have shared a lot of them with Kat and Chelsea, and that was really helpful to me. It's a very heavy read, so I think it's good to have a little bit of like a support system. Yeah, this was not a feel-good story at all. It's a very realistic dystopia set in a very near future in the United States. It has themes of religion and politics and society and power dynamics. There is enslavement and torture, and so it was a very heavy read. It definitely like took a toll on me, and I almost don't even want to talk about it anymore because I don't want to think about this book anymore. I don't want to feel the feelings that I felt reading it, and I don't want to talk about it. And I do want to talk about it, and like I want to tell you all of my thoughts, but also it's like I want to move on from this because it didn't make me feel good at all, which does say something about the quality of the book, I would say. Like, it does take a good writer to make you feel that bad. I will say I was a lot more engaged by this book than the first one, partly because of my expectations, I think. Like, I knew a little bit more what I could expect from this one. And the other reason was that there was a lot more tension in this book than in the first one, I thought. I don't want to give too much away, but there is one person who doesn't seem to really like another person, but we're not really sure why. But there's like a hint that this will be revealed, and so there's that tension. There's also more like action in this book, whereas the first one was just sort of setting the scene. I did mention in my reading vlog that I was like reconsidering certain things about the first book when I was reading this, and that I still think that those things are true, but like I did kind of understand them more after reading this one. And so I guess I'll just explain that and then be done with it. This might be spoiler territory, so if you don't want to hear that, just skip ahead to the next chapter. The first thing, I guess, is about the religion, the Earthseed religion that Lauren is creating or like founding, or whatever you want to call it, her truth. In the first book, I couldn't really make sense of it being a religion, and I also couldn't like connected with this vision of moving to space. Like, it all felt very weird to me, and it still felt very weird to me in this book. And I was like, why is the space thing involved in a religion? Like, I couldn't get the space thing to go with this religion, because the space thing is science. Like, that's a specific goal, that's a vision for society, and that's like technology that can be developed, and like that's science, that's not religion. If it had been like, we believe that we were put on this earth by aliens, like that can be part of your religion. But like building a spaceship and like having a vision to move to space in 100 years, that's science. And so I couldn't make sense of this whole thing in my head. And then Chelsea pointed out like, but there is no religion to this religion. Like, there's no faith, and like there's no God, there's no there is no religion to speak of, really. And so the space thing actually fits pretty well with this, or like the science aspect. And I was like, yeah, it's not there is no religion here. It's very science-based, and like just this is the way of the world. And then the other thing that I talked about the first book was about race, and I had just an expectation that this book was going to have a stronger focus on race and racial issues, especially since I knew that slavery was going to be an aspect of this story. And historically, that has been a lot about race, sadly. And so that was why I was expecting it to be that way in this story. I think that my main takeaway from this book was that it's not about race, and like that's obvious in real life, but it wasn't obvious to me about this story. And I think that was really well done, because it's not people of a certain color that become enslaved in this story. It's whoever is an underdog, basically, or like doesn't have power. And there are people of a lot of different backgrounds and skin color and all of that being enslaved. So what I'm trying to say is that this story made it very clear that anyone can be enslaved, and that is a very human fear. It's not about race or skin color or background or anything like that. It's just human to human, and it's a very human fear. Like torture is the same for everyone, no matter what race you are, or like what background you have, or anything about you at all. I guess that was my biggest takeaway and the strongest point that I thought was made in this book. It's a heavy read and a very thought-provoking read, and I think it's definitely worth reading this duology if you're at all interested, and if you like dystopias, and if you're interested in topics and themes that are relevant to our world today. In terms of like rating, I think I would give it 4 stars in terms of like quality of book, but in terms of my enjoyment, it's more like a 3. Just because I didn't enjoy reading this at all, and I don't think that it's meant to be enjoyable. But yeah, there were also like some things that we have been discussing during our buddy read that we like didn't make sense to us, or I don't know. I would definitely recommend reading it, but like proceed with caution, I guess. Yeah. The next book I finished was Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. And this was also a book club pick, so I'm going to talk about it more in the book club discussion video. And I also read this in my recent reading challenge vlog, so if you want to watch that, you can. This book has been talked about so many times, so I'm not going to go into detail like what it's about. You're welcome to look that up on Goodreads. But basically, it's a generational saga following a family in Korea and then in Japan, and the different sort of characters that are connected to this family and to this woman in particular. I really enjoyed this book. I wish I had read it a little bit slower so that I could take it in more. But I also think it was a good thing in a way that I kind of had that reading challenge to keep myself going forward, because this is also a book about a lot of hardship and difficult things that people go through. So it's not really an uplifting read either. And it's quite dense and quite slow, and there are a lot of things happening. Yeah, I think it was a good thing in that sense that I had this reading challenge and I was like forced myself to keep reading it almost. And not that it wasn't good, because this is a fantastic book. I think it's great. I really felt with and like connected with the characters and empathized a lot with them. There are a lot of characters and a lot of things happening, and so sometimes it did feel a little bit like surface level. All of the hardships are not like explored super deeply, but sometimes it feels like big life events are just like sort of mentioned in the book and no one cared about that. And as readers, we're like, wouldn't people have like had stronger reactions? Wouldn't this be a bigger thing? And like, why aren't we going deeper into this? But I didn't feel that way in this book, because there's just so much hardship all the time. So it's like that sort of blends in a way. And like, as horrible as that is, but like that's, yeah, the reality is kind of horrible. You know, maybe someone had a miscarriage, for instance, and like that would be a big thing for a person and for a couple, and that's just kind of like mentioned in passing and it's not really explored deeply. But I still think that it was better that it was mentioned than not mentioned at all. But like within this already very difficult setting, it's kind of like, yeah, just another thing to deal with. I hope I'm not being like dismissive about it, because that's not my intention, but just there are so many things happening that are so difficult, and so all of the things can't be explored by the author, and I think that they almost can't be explored very deeply by the characters themselves either, because there's just like one thing after the other, and so after a while you're just kind of numb to things. Things almost lose their significance a little bit. I really need some books that make me happy soon, because I'm not reading very uplifting novels. That being said, there's also a lot of joy and love and culture and atmosphere and strong and interesting relationships. There are these big political things going on, and then it's also like selling this little thing at the market and everything in between. I also learned a lot about the relationships between Korea and Japan and the history with all of that. That's not something that I knew a lot about at all. It makes me sad that these kinds of conflicts are everywhere, and it makes me sad that people everywhere treat other people so badly simply based on what they are and like who they are. There's a lot of discrimination and bad treatment of people from Korea, and they're also being stuck in this vicious cycle, and so people are forced to live in a ghetto kind of environment and then being punished for living in a ghetto environment, but like no one else will rent to them, and so they're stuck living in the ghetto, and then they're being mistreated for living in the ghetto. It's just like no way to get out of that cycle. Things like that were difficult to read about, but also very interesting to learn about that dynamic, because I don't really know a lot about that. So that was very interesting. I think it's a 5-star in terms of like objectively judging or like critiquing a novel. For me personally, my enjoyment level was 4 stars. It's not my favorite book ever, but it's really well written and I really liked it. The last book I actually finished today, and it's already September, but I did start it in August and I read most of it in August, and who cares? It is One Little Lie by Lauren Weisberger. And so this is the author of The Devil Wears Prada. And I loved that movie. I thought that was a really fun time. There's also a quote on the back that says, "Fans of Big Little Lies will adore it." And I loved Big Little Lies, both the TV adaptation and the book. This is not that. I was expecting this to be somewhere in between Devil Wears Prada and Big Little Lies, and I guess it kind of is in terms of like seriousness. But if you like Big Little Lies and you are hoping for this to be on that level, I think you're going to be disappointed. I didn't expect this to be as good as that because I've never heard of this before, so you never know, you might find a gem sometimes in the secondhand store. I was hopeful, but I wasn't expecting a lot. If this is not as good as Big Little Lies, it's not as dark, I'll stop comparing it to Big Little Lies. It's not that. We don't have to talk about that again. We follow a few different characters in this book, but I would say the main character is Peyton, who is a news anchor on the morning news. She has recently done a story about rich parents who pay to have their kids accepted into Ivy League schools. And then one morning, her husband is accused and arrested for that same crime. So we follow Peyton and how she handles this whole situation. And we follow Max, who is the teenage daughter who was supposedly being paid for to be accepted into Princeton. And we also get to follow Peyton's sister, Sky, and her relationship with her husband. And she also has a daughter who is 6, and a lot of moving parts in between all of these people. And so, yeah, that's basically the story. And I won't say more because then there won't be much left. Overall, this was kind of meh. Like, it was fine. It wasn't super funny. It wasn't super emotional. It kind of went down smoothly. You know, it's like a glass of milk or something. It's not particularly bubbly or like gritty. It's just kind of middle of the road. That's fine, and sometimes that's exactly what you want. And so if you want something that's just easy to read and there's a little bit of intrigue, but not a lot, like, this is a very safe book, I would say. It's a good enough book for what it is. I just want more from the books that I read. I think this is a solid, like, 3-star book. Like, it was fine. It was okay. You know. I also started on Hours by Phillip Williams in August. So far, I've only read like 15 pages out of 570 something. And I am a bit disappointed about that because this was the book that I was going to read for the Big Book Summer Challenge, and I was going to start it in June and like read it over the whole summer. And I didn't, but you know, I read 15 pages, I did pick it up, and I liked it so far. I hope I can continue reading at least a little bit in this during the month of September, but I do have a lot of other books that I want to read as well. I haven't read any more in Doris Lessing's The Grandmothers. This is a short story collection, so I'm hoping to get to at least one more short story for Shorty September. I really enjoyed the first short story in this, and they're about like 60 pages each, I think. So I think I should be able to squeeze in at least one of these short stories in September. And then I have 3 books for the book club in September, and those are The Power by Naomi Alderman, The Mercies by Kiran Millwood Hargrave, and Clytemnestra by Costanza Casati. So those 3 are my top priority to get read this month, and I'm not really sure which one I'm going to start with. I'm most excited about this one. And I'm excited about these 2 as well. I'm not sure, maybe I should start with these and then treat myself with this one last when I'm done with these. I don't know. I always do this, like push the one that I'm most excited about to last. I don't know. Maybe that's why I never get to the books that make me happy. Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to be reading all of these at least in September. And then I also have plans to read The Center by Ayesha Manazir Siddiqi with Cat at Curious Cat. So I'm looking forward to that. I have that one on audiobook, and I also have The Power and the Mercies on audiobook, so I'm hoping to be able to like read and listen at the same time, because I think that's a very enjoyable way to read. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say for this video. The book club discussion videos about Pachinko and the Song of Achilles will be coming soon. They just take a little bit more. They're coming. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Okay. Let's see what that was called. Margaret. I don't know. It just felt very somber. Maybe the narration ruined it for me, or it was just I didn't feel why?